So the work that I now do is all about getting leaders to be more authentically themselves. And I use that caveat in here. There's actually, when we talk about authenticity and vulnerability particularly, what I don't mean is share everything with everybody, because there still needs to be some level of boundaries, and that's absolutely fine. And, that if we have a really psychologically safe environment, then we encourage more people to open up. But when I started to share my story with people, both my peers within business and also the team that I had around me, the connection that I built was fantastic, and the relationships, because no longer was I walking through the door and saying, "Oh, David, morning, how are you? How's everything doing? Oh, I've got a great weekend." I was able to walk through the door and say, "Do you know what? It's not been great, but I'm coming into work for a bit of switch off, and I love being here, and it's great to be around. But just bear with me today. I've had a bit of a difficult weekend, so bear with me, basically." And that doesn't give the team to take advantage, but actually it gives them the ability to relate. So when they're having really bad time, they will feel more open with you and connect there, and know that you understand that you aren't invincible, that you aren't a machine, that actually you are just human.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leading with Integrity. I'm going to do a very brief intro this week because it is a slightly longer than usual episode, so I want to get straight to that conversation as quickly as possible, raring to go. This week we're talking about an all-important issue in the modern workplace, and that is mental health. Not just for leaders, but for the people that you lead as well. And to help me do that, I'm joined by my guest this week, Gary Parsons. He is a leadership mental health advocate. He's created a new program called The Selfish Leaders, and we'll hear more about that and why those two things connect very shortly. And he's been through his own experiences with all of these issues as well, and is quite open talking about all of those. So there's plenty to cover today, hence the slightly longer episode than usual. And it is an important topic that all leaders in the modern workplace should be thinking about. So without further ado, let's get Gary on the show.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Gary, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Yeah, great. And really exciting to be able to chat to you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, I mean, our last conversation went very well, didn't it? It's a shame we didn't record it, really. So it's good to get this one on tape.
It's always the way. Always the way that we always catch up. And so you and I didn't know each other until recently. So it was definitely an interesting one. So note to self. Yeah, I know there's probably some things on there that we don't want people to hear.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Right. Well, let's get us started then. So over to you for a little bit, really, to tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your career so far, what you do today, why you do it, and anything else in between that you want to talk about, really.
Yeah, that's such a big opening question to ask me. Tell me about you and what you've done, because I've had so much experience and so many different twists and turns on the roller coaster of business over the last 16 years of business, particularly. So I'll jump into that, and we'll probably dive back a little bit further, I'm sure, throughout the podcast. But certainly in 2009, I started a consultancy business. So in the middle of a recession, I always talk about it being the craziest and best thing that I ever did. I don't know whether it was. I'll reflect on that every time I say that question. I say that statement. So for me, I started a business 2009. It was a HR people consultancy business. So we worked with companies focused around their people ultimately. So everything right through from recruiting the right people, managing them through the HR process, that little bit where we want to keep them engaged and retained in a business, pay them. So we had a payroll team, and development as well. So we went and and grew the business and acquired a development business, which was crazy and exciting at the same time. And really did really well. And we turned that business into, me and my co-founder, we turned that business into a multi-award winning business. It was and is a 7-figure turnover business. I did incredibly well. What I didn't talk about over those years, and only been talking about in the last year or so really now, is that during that period, and about 8 years ago in 2017, I was really struggling and really battling with my own mental health. And it's something that we don't talk about. And we'll get into this. I've dedicated the last year talking about my own challenges and getting voices of other people to speak louder and get that volume out there that what I went through was something normal in business. And the association that we have with mental health and severe depression, as I had as at the time, that we associate that with failure, or, which is a really hard word, so forgive me on that, but we associate it with a business closing down or bad things happening. For me, through the team that I had around me, the co-director that I had around me, I found a way, and the support that I had professionally, I found a way to keep on going and doing well. So I absolutely talk about it, because I'm one of the many people, I'm sure, but one of the very few people that outwardly talk about success and the growth and the amazing things that I've had alongside the word depression and mental health. And I've stepped away from that business, stepped away early this year. And now I'm fully committed to what I set out on a mission last year, and I've wrote down on a piece of paper, and I've got all over documents all over my computer, which is to break the stigma of mental health and well-being within the world of leadership. And that's hopefully something that I'm doing very well, and something that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think one thing that strikes me about that story in particular, and I wonder how much of it we don't hear from others as well, is that those kind of mental health challenges aren't necessarily associated with that F word that you mentioned, and that sometimes people, like at the peak of their success, can be going through these challenges, these mental health struggles, depression, burnout, hyper stress, all of those kinds of things, and nobody knows, because it's not normalized to talk about it.
It's a really interesting thing. So, like I say, last year, so on the 1st of April 2024, I went out on my own and said, right, this is what happened to me. This is the experience that I had. And then I started talking to people about it. And it was amazing to hear the amount of people that said, I've been through something similar. In fact, one of those early conversations was also an investor. And I'll expand on the story slightly, actually. So in 2017, when we won one of our first big awards, I remember standing on stage and accepting an award for the business and thinking, I shouldn't be on this stage. I had full-on imposter syndrome. I was full of anxiety. In fact, I'd been to see my cognitive behavioral therapist, my CBT, that I'd done earlier that day. I was full of antidepressants going through my body, and I had to stand on stage and go, wow, we're amazing. Wow, look at this award. And then give a speech, which doesn't always happen when you go to award ceremonies. But on that occasion in 2017, I stood on stage and I was accepting that award and shouting about what we've done and what we're going to do, knowing too well that what I was personally going through. By the way, my co-directors next to me were in tears because they were so proud and so excited about the award that we'd won. And I can't watch TV. I can't watch Holby City without being falling into tears. So, to try and hold it together, going through all those mental health challenges that I was, my co-directors so proudly in tears behind me, and I had to try and hold it together somehow. It was a real challenge. And it's what, like you say, we just don't associate that word as much as we should do with, with mental health, because there are so many. I see it's that we're a lot more grounded. So on the back of that, I went back to the office the next day and spoke to my co-director and said, look, we're doing really well. We're being so successful. And I really want to go out and I want to tell people my story, because he knew what I was going through. When I was disappearing off to medical appointments, he, started to, certainly would have started to ask questions, but we managed to keep it under wraps at the time with everybody else, rightly or wrongly. And I said to him, look, I want to go and tell the world what I'm going through. And even to this day, I don't know whether it was the right decision to hold back on it. But one of the things that he said to me was, look, if we go out to the world and tell them that you are struggling with your mental health and we are wanting to attract investment, we're wanting to grow, we're wanting to scale up, this could be the death of our business. So I reluctantly accepted what he'd said and moved forward. And it kind of went 360 in lots of ways. So like I say, in April last year, I started on this journey to telling my story. And the investor that I spoke to, I said that exact story to him. And he said, do you know what, Gary, if I was around your business at that time and I knew what you were going through, I would have invested in your business more, knowing what I now know, than if I didn't know that. Because, you're being honest and you're being vulnerable. And I get that you care and you're working really hard. And we've got an understanding of it. And it was really, really interesting to hear an investor say that, ironically, if I'd stayed in that business, he would have invested in it, a little bit more, hearing what I'd said. And it just made me think there are so many business owners, particularly, and leaders in businesses that if they do open up, I wonder how many investors would invest in their business. And that stereotype that we've got of, and forgive me on a stereotype, but these, there's many, I look at like Mary Poppins, right, where you've got that big banking hall, certainly the original one, that banking hall full of, old men with grey hair, in suits, deciding who's going to get what investment where. That isn't the reality of 2025 and the world that we're now in. I accept that it still exists in lots of ways, but in reality, it doesn't. And forgive me, there's one stat that I will share with you, and I know your audience will absolutely be interested in this. So when I went out to the world, and I had a really good friend that was doing a positive psychology degree, and she said to me, Gary, it'd be really good if you get some statistics together. I wasn't in a position to start that research. So I went out and looked at the research, and there was one, it's called like the Untold, oh goodness, it's gone out of my mind now. I'll remember if it's like the Untold Toll report. So a startup report for founders and leaders. And within that, it said that 72% of founders and leaders of businesses will experience challenges with their mental health. And I'm just going to say that again. So 72%. So nearly 3 out of 4 leaders, founders of businesses will experience mental health challenges. So we've started to realize very quickly, just with that statistic, it's so normal. And I don't want to invalidate anybody's challenges or struggles that they're going through. But actually, if investors think that that isn't the reality and they can go and invest in businesses of leaders and founders that aren't struggling with their mental health, then more fool them. And it really just helps me just argue my case when I use that statistic.
Yeah, it is kind of a scary statistic, that, isn't it? But I think, the story of that particular investor is genuinely encouraging, and it's heartwarming, isn't it? Because that is the default assumption as a business owner. If you're looking for investment, things like, and it's not just restricted to mental health, I think, but it is that you've got to paint the rosy picture, and a lot of people, I think, see that as realism in business. Like, investors don't want to take that risk on you if you have these challenges on your business, if something's not quite working, and all that sort of stuff. But actually, maybe you're right. Like in 2025, maybe this isn't such an issue for them anymore. But also, I think it's about the kind of investor you want in your business. Do you want someone who is that sort of hard-nosed traditional person who's going to, like, the second anything goes even slightly off plan, or, the second you have even like the slimmest doubt or failure in your mind, or you have any kind of mental health even like entering on the horizon, they're going to pull their cash and run, or they're going to boot you off the board or the leadership team? Or do you want someone who's actually what is truly, in this day and age, I think, realism, who understands that the value of the business is in the team leading it, is in the people doing the work, and therefore sees the importance and the value in looking after those people, making sure they can do their best work and be their best selves at that company or organisation. So, off the soapbox a bit, but
no, I agree with you. I do this now as you know, I as a professional speaker and through my podcast that we'll mention at some point, I'm sure. So the work that I now do is all about getting leaders to be more authentically themselves. And I use that caveat in here. There's actually, when we talk about authenticity and vulnerability, particularly, what I don't mean is share everything with everybody, because there still needs to be some level of boundaries, and that's absolutely fine. And, that if we have a really psychologically safe environment, then we encourage more people to open up. But when I started to share my story with people, both my peers within business and also the team that I had around me, the connection that I built was fantastic, and the relationships, because no longer was I walking through the door and saying, "Oh, David, morning, how are you? How's everything doing? Oh, I've got a great weekend." I was able to walk through the door and say, "Do you know what? It's not been great, but I'm coming into work for a bit of switch off, and I love being here, and it's great to be around. But just bear with me today. I've had a bit of a difficult weekend, so bear with me," basically. And that doesn't give the team to take advantage, but actually it gives them the ability to relate. So when they're having really bad times, and we're sadly the way of our life is that at some point in our lives we will lose somebody that we love, somebody that we I see the cancer diagnoses that are going on with in the world. There's going to be somebody that is diagnosed with cancer. Either we are, or somebody around us maybe. There may be some scares. Something difficult will happen in our lives. And when that happens to you or happens to one of your employees, they will feel more open with you and connect there and know that you understand that you aren't invincible, that you aren't a machine, that actually you are just human. And they're not asking, I use a phrase, I use this with my friends for many years, is that there's always a reason but never an excuse. And I don't want anybody to excuse me. I don't want them to say, oh, here you go, Gary's using it as an excuse to not do X, Y, and Z. But I want some compassion and understanding. I want them to understand that I'm not a robot and I am human, and these things and again, I don't want to invalidate fake people, but normal things happen to normal people, and we are just normal humans, and we just start to just work on an even level, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about setting that example as well, isn't it? Because by doing that as the leader, you're showing others that it's okay to be the same way, to talk about some of these things, to socialise it even. And I so agree with you on authenticity as well. I feel like that's a word that's been sort of hijacked by marketing and the influencer culture a little bit, with the great irony that most of what they do isn't authentic.
Ironically. No, I agree. Ultimately they're good at what they're doing. Ultimately, if a marketing team, particularly the world that I was in, which is employer branding, was an element of that I was involved in. If you want to market your business and you want to attract employees to your business, then you want to be authentically yourself. But I think we're good. We're good at kind of spotting the signs of people that are pretending to be authentic. And, certainly a lot of people will talk about policies versus what it's like on the outside. I was with somebody recently and she said the company that she used to work for, and she gave the example as, on the outside, it looked bright pink. And when you walked through the door and you looked at what it was like to work there, it was dark green. And she said it was completely different to the business that you thought it was, because they do a lot of marketing around what it's like to work for them. But internally for her, it wasn't it wasn't like that whatsoever. And I say for her because we all have different views and we all have different ways, and things tick our boxes and some things really don't. But yeah, good marketing teams really do hone in on it. But I just think just don't try. Just give more exposure to those directors, those leaders, the employees that are absolutely speaking volumes, because they will be the ones that will authentically talk about what it's like and live the culture of your business. And when employees come along, you want them to see what it's authentically like, because if they walk through the door, they're going to leave rather quickly if they don't align to what they want it to be. So it's pointless having values on a wall that you don't match. It really is. It's just, It's counterintuitive. It really is.
Yeah, it's short-term thinking, I think. I mean, from leaders though, I mean, you're so right. Nobody expects that kind of authentic leadership that involves telling everyone everything all the time, like about what I had for dinner or picture your lunch or whatever, that silliness side of it. I think what it's really about is what you do choose to share is honest and truthful and really you. And I think it's so tied up in everything you've been talking about, and the mental health side of it as well, like that internal struggle that you never talked about and all of that sort of side of it, but also things like with the business. If things aren't going so well, like this is the classic example, isn't it? Like you've missed a financial target or a bit of investment didn't come in, and you just tell people everything's fine and you have a smile on your face the whole time. When inside, as the business owner, as the leader, you're like, how am I going to make payroll next month? And I think sharing some of that, people appreciate the honesty. They appreciate the trust you're placing in them by sharing some of that. But also, I think later down the line, they'll look back on it and be like, do you know what? I'm really glad that business owner was honest with me, because it enabled me to plan for what might happen that next month if the worst happened. As opposed to getting caught by surprise.
It's a difficult example because, absolutely, if you tell employees that you're not going to be able to pay them next month, the first thing they'll do is panic. And the reality is that you feel like you might not be able to pay them, wages next month. Ironically, without getting too technical onto it, your obligation as a director is that you're potentially insolvent. So you shouldn't be trading there and then, in my professional and personal opinion. However, go and talk to an accountant and a solicitor to check the legalities around it. But certainly, that's a challenge there. But actually, if it means that you just need to make one more sale, and it's more achievable to overcome that challenge, then that's when you start to think about, is it worth sharing? But if it means that you're all doomed and it's going to be impossible to pay everybody, then yeah, there's a different way. And I guess it's down to circumstance. And there's companies that I saw somebody yesterday that posted onto social media, and they said marketing isn't internal communications, and internal communications isn't marketing. And actually, companies have now got internal communications employees that are working to make sure that those communications go out right. So yeah, maybe a conversation and a podcast episode to have with somebody from internal comms to say, what do you do in this scenario? And I'm sure even they wouldn't quite know the answer, but it's a challenge. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it doesn't get to the point where it's literally a month. I just pulled that out of the air. But yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. There's the legal responsibility. I think there's a responsibility to your people as well, isn't there? And I mean, everyone's got to make their own decision if they find themselves in that situation, I guess. But I have seen it done very wrong.
I was just going to say, it's too late at that point. And I was working.
Exactly.
I know somebody very well that works with accountancy firms, and we were chatting yesterday, and she was saying to me that particularly ones that she's worked with are really worried about sharing. And this is perhaps not always relevant just for accountancy firms, but certainly a lot of firms. But they were really scared of sharing the financials with different partners and different service lines throughout the business. But actually, if we can start being more open with financials and start to just share them, I worked in recruitment a very long time ago, and each branch has their own profit and loss report, and you absolutely get to see how they trade in that business, and you have your your own budgets that you work to. They don't call them targets; they call them budgets for a reason, because you've got to achieve that to be able to make your P&L work. So, if we start being, I'm just going to simplify it. If we start treating our employees like adults and start helping them and getting their understanding of it, then they know how to change that, move that needle on that P&L, so they can make a difference and they can work with you. And of course, we all know that if we all, I think it's common knowledge, but if we have a purpose and it's a shared purpose, and all employees and leaders all relate to that shared purpose. And we saw that with COVID 5 years ago, that when we all know what we're trying to do, when we all have a shared common purpose, then we all do, a majority of us certainly, work towards that shared goal, that shared purpose. So when we start communicating with our employees and, leaders on whole different levels, on a whole new level, should I say, then that's when we really, really do see a difference, and we see a lot more success in companies, and especially honesty and vulnerability and authenticity.
Absolutely. I think it's a question of trust for me as well. Like, for all of those reasons that you said, and that the treating your employees like adults, 100%. And the flip side of that, I think, is like, if you refuse, especially if people are asking the questions about it because they want to know, because there's genuine curiosity and interest there, and you're refusing to give them, like, the natural response then is, well, why aren't you what aren't you telling me? What's going wrong? What's happening behind it? Are you stealing from the company? Like, are we a week away from bankruptcy? What's going on here? And so you create that negative thing that you're probably trying to avoid by not telling them in the first place. So again, there's a massive irony there, isn't there?
Yeah, that distrust, dishonesty, that deceit, perhaps.
Yeah, which might not even be there, but that's the natural assumption if you won't do something, isn't it? Or you won't share a bit of information, is that you're trying to keep some sort of secret.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, depending on the size of your business, it's public information anyway at a certain point. So they're going to go and find it if they really want to know. Either way, you might as well just share it when it comes to financials anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to get too dragged into, at all get dragged into politics, especially in the current world that we're in. But we've seen, certainly the US and the UK have started to do this, isn't it, as well now? But they're really trying to hone in on where they can make savings. And as part of that, they were sharing where departments were spending money. And okay, they were using those examples to justify a small amount of money compared to the other 98% of the money that they spend. But we get to understand through that honesty, that transparency, where the money is being spent. And we have that different level of accountability. And I do think that accountability absolutely needs to be more open and more transparent in businesses as well. And, I guess it's, the word is transparent, whether we are experiencing challenges and we need to do something about it, and we are being honest and open and sharing things, then, absolutely, it goes back to what I said about, always a reason but never an excuse. Why are you spending £100,000 on this? We want to know, we want to understand it. But then, I don't know, I'm feeling, as I'm saying it, I'm hearing that kind of, that phrase is a small bit of knowledge is dangerous, and we've got to make sure we do it in the right way. And it goes back to how we manage communications. It's not easy. It really isn't easy.
Yeah, you're right. None of it is easy. I guess my default position has always been, regardless of whether it's good news or bad news, I think, would I rather people heard it from me and that therefore there is a conversation in which I can participate as the leader? Or would I rather they find out from someone else, perhaps a rumour, perhaps inaccurate, perhaps with the wrong emphasis? And to me, that's a no-brainer kind of question. I want to be in the conversation. I want to make sure that it's honestly delivered, that it is transparent, that it's accurate as much as I can. And if you were, as the leader, don't want to be in that conversation, then you're accepting that they're going to believe whatever information they can find, or regardless of what gaps or inaccuracies or, dare I say, mistruths that they may find. So, that's why I see transparency is so important in leadership anyway. And
Yeah.
I know I'm on my soapbox again.
You're allowed.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true in the political context as well, isn't it, in recent years? But yes, like you, I'd rather not veer into that today.
It'll probably change within a week of recording this as well. So,
that's true.
Yeah, we might as well
That
just
is
not
true.
bother because it's changing every day at the moment as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's getting a bit hectic is probably the word, isn't it? So I'd love to talk about this new program that you've been developing, and I think you've got a keynote speech around it as well, and this idea of selfish leaders. Because to me that feels, I don't know, like a bit of like a contradiction in terms, but let's hear like your take on it and how you define it and what led you to creating it, and then maybe we can dig into it a bit.
Yeah, ironically, thinking about politics and hearing the word selfish leaders, it feels like we might get drawn into that a little bit more. But actually, yeah, it's a concept. So ultimately, as I explained at the start, I started out on my journey to break that stigma of mental health and well-being with leaders, because we just don't look after ourselves well enough. And for many years, certainly working in HR and development as I did, I saw that the people naturally went to that, a bit of guilt really, to say, you need to be looking after your employees. Are you looking after your employees? Are you, the mental health first aid qualification that's done very well in terms of popularity? And I think people I've seen personally started to question that now, to go, is that still fit for purpose? But certainly, growth in that area is great, and certainly branding point of view. So I started to see it a lot where people were going, you need to look after your employees. If you're not looking after your employees, then you're a bad person. And it really frustrated me. It really, really did. So from my point of view, I started to say, well, actually, if we're going to change the world of leadership and we're going to look after our well-being, then what we need to do is, look after the employees' well-being, then I see it as being a top-down process rather than a bottom-up process. So if we can look after those leaders and we can make sure that they are absolutely looking after their own mental health and well-being, particularly, so that full 360, then they will naturally be more compassionate. They will understand what's going on with their employees, and it's great. And what I was realizing is that we just don't prioritize ourselves whatsoever. We really, really don't. And so for me, the word selfish is, for many years, and I've decided I'm going to go on a mission to change the definition of a dictionary. I've just ordered a t-shirt that's got selfish written across the front of it as a label, and then a new definition on the back of the t-shirt, so people will see, they will go, wow, he's calling himself selfish. And I think for me, the word selfish particularly is, if we start looking after ourselves, if we are a little bit more selfish, then we can start being more selfless. And from what I see in the work that I've been doing over the last year on a one-to-one and with groups of people, is that there are a lot of selfless leaders out there that are absolutely making sure that their employees, the teams around them, are supported, that they've got everything that they possibly need. But they're doing it from an empty place in lots of ways. They're overstretched, under-resourced. Their capacity is just, they're lacking in the ability to have, they're doing far too many hours. They are getting far too involved. And the work that I'm doing and the program talks about boundaries. So we look at the boundaries that leaders set. And I don't just mean turn your phone off after 5 o'clock and turn it back on at 9 a.m. But I mean, those are emotional boundaries as well, about getting too involved into a project and getting too, and I don't know if you've come across the drama triangle. So it's a really interesting world of psychology where we have the victim, we have the hero, and we have the perpetrator in there as well. And we can come in and save the day and save that victim. but actually we become the perpetrator, the villain in that story sometimes if we get too involved. So it's that sense from a leader to actually sit back and still support them and still make sure that it happens and you can resolve a situation depending on what's going on. But if you just emotionally, mentally get too absorbed into that, then not only have you lost lots of hours, but you've also lost that. I don't know about you, and I've had a really busy day at work. All I want to do is switch off and watch something stupid on TV. I don't want to have to think. I don't want to watch a really interesting crime drama. I want to just sit and do nothing, or I might go to bed early because mentally we're drained. We're overwhelmed with what's gone on that day. So the program is very much focused on, and the keynote is certainly telling my story as a speaker, and reminding people about the boundaries, that the difference that it does make, but just getting people to be more selfish, because if we are more selfish, it's that classic, and I use them, but they are absolutely cliches, so they make me itch a little bit, is that those signs when we get on a plane and they say, in an event of an emergency, always put your mask on first, and before you do with somebody else. That is ultimately going, let's break that down. If you can't breathe and you die, you can't support anybody else. So quickly get your oxygen and make sure you can breathe, because when you can help other people. And we're just forgetting that fundamental, that we are forgetting that we're not inhuman, that we're not robots, that we do need to look after ourselves, because let's face it, if we're not there, then nobody is supporting those employees. And that is quite dangerous for an organization, particularly the higher you get up that chain and how involved you might be in supporting those employees.
Well, it's hard to argue with the idea now you've explained it. So I used to be one of those leaders who, exactly as you've described, I think it was the team first and myself second, if then. And it did, in hindsight, it did lead to burnout. It led to exactly what you've talked about, like the really struggling at the emotional level to let go of stuff when you got home. The phone was always there. The emails were always flashing, even in the dead of night. And you just, it is very difficult. And when you become a business owner and entrepreneur as well, I think it gets even worse, because then you're personally, probably financially, definitely emotionally invested in the success of that business. And how you define that success can be quite problematic sometimes as well.
Yeah.
And it just leads you down that path, doesn't it, of all these challenges, these mental health issues that are just kind of waiting to catch you out once you get to them, those pitfalls to fall into. So I'm coming around to this idea of being a bit more selfish as a leader. I think where I am at the moment personally is seeing it as part of the leader's role and responsibility is looking after the team and the people, but the leader is included within that. They are part of the team. They are one of those people. So you do have to look after yourself too, and not as an afterthought.
Mm.
And I really like your explanation as well. To me, again, we're trotting out a cliche here. I hope you'll let me off, but it's that whole argument about the ends versus the means, isn't it? And I think the ends have stayed the same. It's looking after the people, achieving the result, etc. It's just the means of how we do that, isn't it? And the order in which things need to happen.
Yeah, it does. And I'll not get too super technical on this, but I looked at the dictionary because I was desperate to find a word, and I challenge your audience, if there's anybody that's listening and thinking there is a word, you need to use this, and somebody said to me, it's just self-care, and I was like, no, that's not it. I always feel like I need to go and chat to Susie Dent or somebody that's understands words, and I actually went back and looked at the etymology of the word selfish and where that came from, and tried to find somewhere different, because when you look at the word selfish, you go, the dictionary currently defines it as somebody that is very self-absorbed, that they just care about themselves, nobody else. And it's very, very one-sided. And then when you look at selfless, it's about looking after everybody else. there's no kind of middle ground. It's like, actually, how can we be selfless by still checking in on ourselves, by still being more self-aware, that we are making sure that we're not burning ourselves out, that we're not overstretching? How can we do that? And so I've just decided that we just really need to change that word selfish, because we're not arrogant, we're not self-obsessed, we're not, it's not at detriment to everybody else, and we're not putting ourselves above others. Actually, what we're doing is we are looking after ourselves, because then we can support other people. And I'll say it again, how can we be selfless if we're not selfish? We're coming from an empty place. It's a real challenge, and you make a really good point there, is that we do spend a lot of time and feel as directors, particularly and entrepreneurs, that we need to look after everybody else and need to make sure they're okay. And we just forget to look for the signs. And part of the work that I do, and in fact, a big proportion of the work, and certainly a lot of the conversations I have with HR teams, is they say, we need to get our leaders to be more self-aware, because it's just not happening, and they are just running around and trying to do everything, and we can't stop them. And it's leading to burnout. It's leading to, that feels quite an extreme to use the word burnout. And I don't use that, it's not a throw around word that I use. Having had, I've had clinical burnout myself. I see people where they just aren't able to make decisions that they need to, or fast decisions, good decisions. They're not able to be creative in their thinking, which is, all of these signs that burnout is coming, particularly. And I remember those days myself, because, and I will say this, because I saw a social media post yesterday of somebody that's business has closed down, an accountancy business that has closed down. And he said on his post, I didn't spot the signs for 6, 12, 18 months. But with hindsight, I realized what was going on. And we have an unhealthy obsession with business when we are an entrepreneur, when we're wanting to go and take over the world, particularly mission-led entrepreneurs. We, less of the hobbies, but again, it's dangerous. We suddenly become a little bit obsessed, and we work every hour of every day. We work till midnight. Then we get up early the next morning, and the first thing we do is we look at our phones, and we check the bank, or we go through the emails that we've got on our phones. We might take a phone call whilst we're eating breakfast on the way into the office. We are absolutely addicted to business. And there's been a really toxic productivity culture that needs to stop, where people are saying, if you don't work 12 hours a day, you're not up at 8 a.m., you're not pumping iron at the gym before you go to work. If you aren't going to every networking event, if you aren't doing any of these things, do you really care about your business? And it's, unfortunately, the world of social media has let that toxic productivity culture manifest itself too much. And people have started to realize that. But we get a little bit addicted, the endorphins, the excited moments where we're really working heavily on a project. That's absolutely fine. I am one of those people, but just not every day, day in, day out. You just can't do that, once a week, maybe, but not every day. It's unsustainable. And that's the word. You can't grow sustainably like that.
No, I'm with you as well. And I can't stand that kind of culture either, the social media side of it, in particular around this hustle culture, the entrepreneur, all of that. Especially when they use that word productivity, because there's the fundamental misunderstanding of what that word means there, isn't there? Because actually it's not about working the most hours, is it? It's about producing the best outcome in the shortest amount of hours. That's what productivity means. The more you do in the less time, that is the definition of productivity. So anyway, yeah.
It's like work smarter, not harder.
Exactly that. And there's something missing there, isn't there? But it's getting all the clicks and the views. That's why they're really talking about it, I suspect.
Yeah, and they're right. I think unfortunately, it's the people that are successful or have been shouting about it for a long time because, lots of people are naturally, early risers, or, they've seen success and they are saying you've got to work hard for it. Absolutely. We agree that you've got to work hard for it, but they're perhaps quite often trying to monetize it. And, I go back to the fact of I've had a very successful business that I've exited, in the last couple of months, and great. I've been successful. I am successful. And, you made that statement of, how do we define success? And I think that is it ultimately. How do we define success? And I work with, so I qualified as a mentor last year because it was something I consciously wanted to do. I stayed away from coaching because I like to get more involved and more under the skin of what's going on. And as a mentor, the thing that I really do push with individuals, with entrepreneurs and leaders that I'm working with, is that you don't need to earn £1 million to be able to be successful. You can be successful of £100,000. And, I started telling this story only a few weeks ago. I remember the year that we did 1.2 million, and we did incredibly well. It was great. It was a really busy, hectic year. The best year was the following year, which we did £800,000, and, so £400,000 less. And we were happier. We were more productive. We had less people in the business doing that. And we were more efficient. We were better at what we did. And we're so much. I really enjoyed that year that we did 800,000 compared to the year prior. And it was just the type of business that we were doing was that was the main thing really, because it wasn't the one that was time consuming. It wasn't the low margin stuff. It was the services that matter, and working with the customers in a completely different way to what we'd done before. We tested it, and we'd test and fail, and as you do, and we worked so much better the following year. And I think that is it. How do you define success? And don't go chasing those arbitrary targets of £1 million. No, I talk about a 7-figure business. One, because of the legalities around it now I've exited, but I don't want people to just hear the word 1 million and get excited. That was a lot of stuff was going on to be able to get those 7 figures, and 6 figures is fine too. In fact, I've got a great friend of mine that talks about being a 3-figure entrepreneur. So it's not that bad.
No, I'm with you. And I think that idea about how we define success as well, I think there's that whole keeping up with the Joneses aspect of it, isn't there? And again, social media, I think, makes this problem a lot worse. But why let someone else's definition of success control your business, your life? And again, this is something that I've struggled with over the years as well. But right now, I'm both the happiest I've ever been professionally and probably the least successful by that traditional metric. But for me, success is, can I sleep at night? Yes. Do I enjoy what I do pretty much every day? Yes. That's it. That's all I need personally. As long as I can raise enough to keep the mortgage paid and the roof over our heads, that's all we need, and thankfully I don't have to do that bit alone. So
you're absolutely right. And I go back to that statistic of 72% of leaders that struggle with their mental health. I can't quite remember the exact figure now, but I know it's quite high in terms of sleep. And, certainly it's a huge proportion of founders, of leaders of businesses that are really struggling with their sleep. That's not something I want to be a part of, and absolutely was, and we all do struggle with our sleep here and there. In fact, I had a good night's sleep last night, which was nice. For a couple of days I'd not been able to. But why are we putting these pressures on ourselves when that means that we can't sleep? When we really want to, I don't have a family as an immediate family, children, etc. But if you've got your own children, your other half, your wife, husband, whatever it may be, if you are so tired to the point where you can't spend the time with your children, with your family, then that's not great either. And, They don't want to be looking over and seeing that you are working all of those hours and not showing that relationship with you. And I think, I call it a life-work balance, and it's not a work-life balance. Again, putting life first at the beginning. Ultimately, it's a life-work balance that we need to get better at. And I've seen some people do it very successfully and have some very successful businesses on the back of it. And yeah, it all sounds quite theoretical, but honestly, people that are, if you listen to this now and just reflecting on it, think to yourself, actually, where can I make changes because I need to? And you might be in desperate times and you might be struggling. But, honestly, if you can start working on the things that matter to you, some of the poorest people that I know are the happiest people. So don't chase those monetary targets. If you can break even, if you can pay those bills, and even look at how those bills are, where you can take bills away, whether if you're certainly a solo entrepreneur, a micro entrepreneur, if you can take cost away, as you would do in business, by the way, if you can take cost away of your own or reduce those costs or restructure that finance in a different way, go and do it. Because why are we chase the top line so often, but it's the bottom line that we need to be working on as entrepreneurs. Go and do that in your own life. Go and see where you can do. I've certainly, step away from my business, I've certainly lowered my overheads. I really have done. I live on my own. I've got a big mortgage. Just spent a lot of money renovating my house. I absolutely have reduced the amount of money that I spend every month. And have I really noticed a difference? Probably not. So,
yeah, I always find, especially like the monthly ingoings and outgoings, you spend what you have. I find it's never difficult. Like if you have loads, it's really easy to find ways to spend it. But it's also, I think, if you really sit down and think about it properly, as you've suggested, it's also quite easy when that incoming is dropping to reduce all those things you were spending on. It brings focus to an extent. And again, I don't want to minimize anyone's challenges either. But I think it's something that's easier to scale than it may appear. If you can there's a lot of things you can learn to live without, I suppose.
Yeah. And my financial services, financial advisor friends will say, save £1,000 a month, for example, if you can, rather than spending £1,000, if you can save £1,000, go and put that money into different investments where you can do with the right advice. Because go and turn that money into something. Because if that means that you are wanting to get your mortgage paid off and that is your goal, I don't know whether that's the right goal or not. But if that's your goal, then let's focus in on that. Go and get that advice and go and work with those people to be able to do that. Or it might be that you just want to save up to go and do something more. Or as somebody that I was talking to yesterday, and it's great that I'm surrounding myself with these people, by the way, but her and her husband are buying I've got a camper van. I've got a Transporter T6 for anybody that knows them. So a Volkswagen camper van, which is great. So I was talking to her yesterday and she's getting a Crafter, which is like the Mercedes Sprinter version of the VW. And I was so envious of it, but she's worked really hard. They've saved up. That's where they're spending their money. And do you know what? The type of work that she's doing, she's realized that whilst they're spending that money to get that converted and saving up to have that done, she's changing the type of work that she's doing so she can work remotely. And they're going to go in the van and they're going to go around Europe, and they're having a little Vespa bike to go inside it as well. And that's what she wants to do. And so she's gearing and configuring her work life so she's able to do that. Like, why do we not do that more? Why do we not cater, get the businesses to work for us, not the other way around? And just taking that long, hard look at ourselves and just going, what are we doing this for? How can we tweak? How can we pivot what we're doing to be able to work better for us? I know at the moment I've just said that, the sun has just started to shine through, which is great. But, the sun is coming out. I'm going to be going out in my camper van and working away and, using my laptop and working from there where I can do. So, I just need to get a couple of things for it to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an attraction to that whole the digital nomad life, isn't there? 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, one final thought. I mean, we talked about sleep a bit there, didn't we? I did a whole series of interviews last year about burnout, speaking to specialists in that area. And interestingly, very high, if not top on most of their lists about things to do to recover from or prevent burnout was get a good night's sleep. And I know as well from other reading I've done, like there's a lot of positive health outcomes that are associated with that as well. Or vice versa, like negative ones if you don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree. It's not just one night's sleep either, but just getting on top of your sleep. Yeah. And then just like rest as well. I think, that for me, that was the biggest, I've got lots of books here and so a shout out to, the Burnout Survival Kit. That was a really, really interesting book. I'm going to grab it now to remind myself of the name. Imogen Doll. Imogen, brilliant book, and I definitely think it's one that people need to have a look at because there's just some emergency challenges when you open it up and you go, in an emergency, how can I deal with this? But there's also some good techniques to be able to get on top of that. So, yeah, I felt like burnout was a buzzword for a while, but it's absolutely is real. It's something that I've gone through and something that I've recovered from, and it can rear its ugly head very quickly. So, you do need to just keep on top of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was a buzzword, but I don't think that makes it not a real thing. My memory's not as good as yours, so I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was certainly, I think it still is, it's on the rise, isn't it, globally. So
yeah,
I'm not sure what that means either in the context of the rest of the world and national economies and all that sort of thing. But
yeah, I know the World Health Organization, they did identify that burnout is a huge challenge. And it's something that when they start talking about it, you realize how big it is. It really is. And, within the business community, I think the frustrating thing for me I've tried to look at research of this, that we don't record. Many people don't get the diagnosis of burnout and lots of different things, but ultimately as well, we don't record the occupation of those people. A bit of a trigger warning from a suicide point of view for anyone that's listening, but I try to look at the occupation for suicide because, we know that is unfortunately, it's something that we say far too often. Even one is too many, but we see it far too often. And I was looking at the occupation rates, and we do record it, but it's just not at a level that would be helpful for people to look at. To look at leaders for business owners particularly. And, I look at names like Kate Spade, the well-known fashion designer who took her life at the height of success. And it's just not great. It's just not great. So we do really need to get on top of burnout because then, we ultimately will save lives as well.
Absolutely.
And have a better, more productive economy. Sorry to jump in. It's like, to actually do well, let's grow GDP in the UK. Economically, we need to get better as an economy in the UK anyway. Get back on my political soapbox. But if we can support leaders and stop them from experiencing burnout, stop the closure of businesses, they can be more productive. They can do better. They can, absolutely. Why are we not investing in those leaders? It just doesn't make any sense. I'm talking with my local MP who's trying to get that message across. I was in the House of Lords at the beginning of December 2024. I was in the House of Lords and went to the House of Commons and I had a chat with people over there. We've got lots of different entrepreneurs about that. Absolutely, and involved in something called the Lilac Review, which is about supporting disabled entrepreneurs. People don't think mental health and well-being is a disability, but it does fall into that category. And absolutely, I'm taking full advantage of that to go and get my voice heard in those circles and get people to listen and do something about it. And I had a really good chat with the Department of Trade, and they absolutely recognise that they need to be doing more to support people. So, let's keep watching the space in that side of it. But yeah, it's not just about, we need to get better to look after ourselves. It's so much bigger. It really is when we start looking at economy.
No, definitely. I'm glad to hear it, that you're getting involved as well, and that the right conversations are happening. It's, I don't know, it's a difficult one for me as well. As a small business owner, I find it really frustrating. A lot of again, we're veering into politics slightly, but at government levels, like, most of the interest is usually in jobs, and jobs are associated in their minds with the big multinationals, the big corporates, even though 99.9% of the businesses in this country are small and medium. And that really winds me up.
Yeah, you're right. You're right to be wound up about it. I think from my challenge that I always get is that when we talk about well-being, that people don't see the tangible, output, the tangible impact it has on, on businesses and people. And I think a lot more work needs to be done on that. It really does. There's lots around well-being from an employee point of view and generic point of view. I think, is it for every £1 we spend, we get £4 or £5 back? I think it was one of the big consulting firms that they went out and did that research, which was really helpful. So we know that when we invest that money into well-being, it does make a difference. But yeah, just the same way that we talk about businesses, absolutely. Politics is a very interesting terminology. The politics of getting businesses to invest in mental health and well-being is the same as getting government to invest in mental health and well-being. It's a huge challenge, and there's lots. I would say watch this space. I think certainly there is a lot more businesses that are shouting up about it and making people hear. I will share something with you if I can quickly find it whilst we're talking. So I worked with the local East Midlands Chamber of Commerce, and they went out and they did their economic so they do a quarterly economic survey. So the results have just come out of that. So this is literally hot off the press. The day of recording this, hot off the press. So when they went and looked at the data, we asked 4 questions, and I'm just trying to grab the information in front of me, hastily trying to find it. So we said to them, to the businesses, what are the primary challenges that are affecting your own well-being as a business leader and an owner? Now this goes out to, I think it's over 3,000, I think it is, different businesses. I think they had about 700 or 800 people reply. Waiting to get those stats, so forgive me. But the biggest challenge that they had that was affecting well-being, which was nearly 60%, was, and we've mentioned it already, was work-life balance, or life-work balance, as I like to say. Some of the others were financial stress was the other one. So we know economically, the climate that we're in, we need to work on that. There's loads of different responses on here. Employee related issues, regulatory pressures, business growth, isolation and loneliness. It's lots of different stuff that's going on. I've had that email about an hour before I started chatting with yourself, so it literally is hot off the press. So I'm going to be looking at that data a little bit more. So if people like the Chamber of Commerce can gather that data and we can start finding that and hearing about it, then we can start giving that to government and getting policy to be, absolutely start to see change in that. So, I'm really excited that the East Midlands Chamber of Commerce, through lots of badgering and pestering them to get them to do it, like absolutely the influence that has is amazing, and the senior management team at the East Midlands Chamber have absolutely been phenomenal with it. I've got to say, they've been absolutely groundbreaking in wanting to really do something about it. So watch this space. I think is maybe is the phrase to mention.
Yeah, fair play to them. Yeah, I mean, sadly, there's nothing on that list though that's surprising.
Yeah.
All familiar stories, I fear. But it's good that it's getting the right attention, though.
I think we need to ask why now, though. And I think I was on a members call a few days, the middle of last week, and there was members on there, and they were talking about, what challenges are you seeing in business, and the classic recruitment challenge was coming up. Trying to recruit people. Absolutely, that was there. And also the challenge of finding people with the right skills to go into businesses was there. Now you couple that with the challenging economic climate, they need people to do the work. When are you going to burn out? When are you going to have the biggest challenges around your own well-being within your businesses? When are leaders going to feel it the most? It's when they have a challenging level of resource and workforce that they've got orders coming through the door and they need to service those clients and they can't do it. So everybody's working overtime and burning themselves out. That's not great. And lots of those businesses, ultimately, the bigger ones particularly, are having recruitment freezes as well. I don't know where where budgets will go this year and where challenges will go, but we've seen that the employer national insurance going up is making businesses not want to recruit because not want to recruit. They want to recruit. They just can't afford it. When they look at on paper, they just can't afford it. And people are seeing bills go up hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds. So they are doing the best they can with the people that they've got. So the pressure that is on businesses from, like I say, employees right up to leaders is just too much right now. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me seeing stats like that. And I think it's just going to get worse, unfortunately, which is why I need to do more work and go out there and help people through that. But even I can't wave that magic wand.
No, sadly not. If only.
Absolutely. I'd be a very rich man if that was the case. Yeah. Of course, I would only make sure I'd pay my bills. I would be the ultimate philanthropist, I could say that.
Yeah. Right. So, I've just glanced at the time and we've been going over an hour. Time is flying. I think one more, it's kind of the same question, but there's two sides to it, I suppose, before we have a quick chat about leadership more generally. What advice would you have for leaders or entrepreneurs who may be struggling with their mental health? And then the flip side of that is, and then what should they also be doing for the people that they lead? So you can answer it in two halves if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And remind me the second half if I forget. So the first half is, I've got to say, the very fact that somebody recognizes that they're struggling with their mental health and well-being is the first thing that needs to happen. And I know it's a bit of a cheat answer here, but there's so many people that don't recognize that they just think it's normal. They feel tired because they feel like they've been working too much. So so people that aren't spotting the signs, I would say straight away, those are the things that you need to be doing. And I'll add that in here now. So if you're feeling tired too many times, then absolutely start saying to yourself, is this right? Is it okay that I'm feeling tired today, tomorrow, again and again and again? When am I going to stop feeling tired? And notice that. If you're feeling fine and you're listening to this and you're going, oh yeah, I'm fine, I don't really struggle with my mental health, then just write a journal. And I'm not saying that you will struggle with your mental health, but I'm saying just start writing a journal. Just start being more self-aware. So spot those signs when you're tired. And it's a bit, I see the advert on TV where they say, have you had a cough for a week or longer, or 2 weeks or longer? If you've been feeling tired for a week or 2 weeks or longer, that's too long. And I'm not a medical professional, but I would say that's too long. So if you're starting to see that, start to think about what's going on in your life. Secondly, look around you. Are you the only person that is doing particular tasks? We talk about, particularly in business, that we wear too many hats and we've got to wear the marketing hat, the finance hat, different side of things. Start to think about that a little bit more. How reliant is your business on you as an individual? And what can you do to change that? And I don't mean go out there and employ lots of people or spend a fortune on a bookkeeper or accountancy. Don't do that. But just step back and just look a little bit more down that lens and go, what can I do? Because it might be that you are doing things that you don't need to do, and you can just start to look after yourself. I think I started to answer the second part of that question a little bit too prematurely, but yeah, I think spotting the signs for me is that first step. So if you're starting to say to yourself, how can I manage my mental health? I'm starting to see that I'm struggling. How can I do it? Then you are already on that pathway. You're already on that route. And I would say, and with some hesitancy, because I appreciate that we've got to protect our boundaries a little bit more than we would like. But if you are starting to struggle, the best thing you can do is start having a conversation. And I will say, go to that circle that you can confide in, those people that know you well, because you will find out very quickly that you're not on your own. And it's something that we experience as leaders is loneliness. That phrase of, it's lonely at the top. It is. It really is. So if you start to feel like you're struggling that little bit, that you're struggling with your sleep, we've mentioned it a few times, so it comes to my mind straight away, but you got low energy levels. I think about my old phones where I put them on charge and they don't last very long. And, as much as I charge my phone to 100%, the battery capacity isn't great. So if you're feeling like you are recharging your batteries to 100% and very quickly your battery runs out the following day, then that's a telltale sign to me that you need to be looking at that, and just share that conversation with people around you, because very quickly you'll realize that you aren't alone, and you will realize that conversation is quite a normal one and other people can relate to it, and people will start to hold you accountable. Of course, I'm going to say work with a leadership mentor like myself and, get somebody to hold you accountable. And I do think that if you're a coach, you're a mentor that is listening to this, I think you do have more of a responsibility than anybody to make sure the people that you're working with, that you're supporting, if you spot the signs or you're hearing the words that they are starting to go down that slippery slope, then you are responsible and you need to be pulling them to one side and having that conversation with them, even if they don't want to hear it. Good sleep is a really good thing. Just, and doing that little bit, that time and motion study. Where are you spending your time? Where are you emotionally getting too involved in conversations? And where can you just draw that line, that boundaries? And, if I may, sorry, I appreciate I've got a bit of a tangent in your answer. Go and have a look at a video that I've done on this on YouTube, Gary Parsons UK. From my point of view, so I've developed something called a self framework. So part of the selfish leadership program that I've developed, and that is to, and it self ultimately stands for 4 different things. So that is setting our boundaries. I think I've already talked about that one quite a lot. Elevate your well-being. So get that higher up on the list for you. Lead with intention. So think about how you're going through that day, how you can lead with intention ultimately, and then foster growth. And that means growth from your point of view. How can you learn from the experiences that you've gone through? And then then in turn, role models growth throughout your team as well. So set boundaries, elevate well-being, lead with intention, and foster growth. If you can get that right, then that's how you can get on top of your own well-being.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think part of it, and I guess it's tied up in like the stigma side of it, some of the like the hustle culture bit as well. I think there's quite a common narrative with some of these things where people, we don't want to admit that it's something we're struggling with, and that's not necessarily a self-awareness thing. It might be you're fully aware of it, you just don't want to talk about it, don't want to admit that it's an issue. Or the other side of it could be like, and I've heard this, I've been through this myself as well, it's kind of just that feeling of, well, it's just the way it is. Like if you're in a startup, if you're a co-founder, if you're an entrepreneur, it's just the way it is. Everyone goes through this. It's normal. That's how it is. So there's no point complaining about it. Just got to get on with it. Put up or shut up sort of mentality. And that second one, I mean, there's an element of truth in there, in that, yes, most people in that situation will go through this, but it's completely the wrong response to it, isn't it? Because it doesn't have to be that way, and B, it doesn't mean it's not an issue and you shouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that normalizing. And I think I wrote a blog on this last year at somebody. It rings a bell of right that many, but it's like normalizing bad mental health and well-being, and just going, oh yeah, it's normal and we accept it, and having that self-acceptance and going, oh yeah, it's fine. We do it quite easily, actually, don't we? That at the end of the week we go, God, I'm absolutely shattered. I'm really tired. But I've had a really busy week, so absolutely, yeah, I can understand why that's happened. But it's like, I've had a really good week. I've been really busy. That's why I'm tired. And every weekend I started, I reflect back on it now. I got to the point where every Saturday I'd go into hibernation. That's not right. That isn't good. Like, normalizing this behavior that the weekend is to rest and recover and go back. No, the weekend is to enjoy time with friends and family and go and do the things that aren't work related. They aren't. They're not rehab. We don't go into a weekend of rehabilitation. We are going into a weekend of fun, excitement, challenge. It's not the time where you go, oh no, I need to just go and rest and get ready for next week. It's just, I got into a habit on a Saturday morning where I'd get up and I'd go and walk to my local shop. I'd buy a beautiful little ciabatta bread. It was on the local little co-op shop, other brands available. Little co-op shop, get a lovely little ciabatta, get a couple of sausages, take them back home. Anyone that listens, I'm vegan, so vegan sausages, just in case they think, oh, who's getting meat sausages? Go back home. I think I've got some like lovely chutney or sauces. Go back home. In fact, I think at that point I was eating dairy, so I had like an egg on there as well, and just make myself this most beautiful egg sausage ciabatta thing in the morning. And that was how I'd start my day, by getting up, going out, and just starting and building that habit. And that was just something that I really enjoyed at a weekend. And that might be a coffee. I've got a lovely, where I am in Belper in Derbyshire. I've got a UNESCO World Heritage Site on my doorstep. So I'll go down, and I'm doing it later today. I'm going down to have a coffee with a friend and going to chill out, and just, it's a beautiful setting with the river there, and the kids going to play, and people, going past and paddle boarding. I saw somebody the other day, and just going to just relax and enjoying that stuff is great. So we should do that more, really.
Absolutely. And actually, I think as an entrepreneur, a business owner, especially if you're doing it on your own, actually, that's one of the great benefits, I think, is that you can do things like that. You have enough control over your diary, whereas we may not have in employment roles, that you can just program in downtime. And that's something I've got way better at than I used to be. And it's made such a huge difference to just general levels of happiness, lack of anxiety, all sorts of things.
Yeah. That's when I talk about lead with intention. Get your calendar and put an hour's lunch in. Go for a walk. And when I had my team, they were great at. So we had a policy where they couldn't eat at their desks, and it felt very rigid and very horrible that they couldn't do it when they first read it on paper. But actually, it was part of our culture, is that we didn't eat at our desk. We ate with each other and sat and had a chat, but we'd get out the office as well, and we'd go for a walk. And when we opened a new office, it wasn't as embedded as we would like. And I saw that team where they would eat at their desks, and I got them to move away from their desks, and the difference it made to them. They were really against it at first. They really, really were. But just having that, that downtime, even if it was just 15, 20 minutes of downtime, which I, don't advocate, they need to have a proper amount of time, but just going away and just having that time away and switching off, they go back and they did so much better. And you see it with, and I will say this, by the way, I'm the least fit person. I don't do any exercise whatsoever, but you see a terminology within the Olympics and athletes where they talk about forced rest. And that is forcing you to have rest, to have time out. because when they do have that forced rest, they come back and they do incredibly well. So I think it's just something that we need to take back into businesses, just to, again, not that toxic productivity where we say you'll work for your lunch and you'll eat your sandwich at your desk. And we shouldn't stop people from doing that, but actually go and make sure that they do it, because they just having 10, 20 minutes away from their desk, they can be so much more productive for that next hour. It makes up for those 20 minutes. And I'd love to someone to actually go and do that. I feel like we should get a load of people to do that and monitor it and do a great study on it. But I'm pretty sure they'll see the results come back and do well on the back of it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And setting aside even like the productivity side of it and whether there is actually a net benefit, it from the mental health perspective and like well-being at work and avoiding things like burnout as well. I mean, it's just the right thing to do, isn't it? And I complain about this a lot as well. People who have listened before would have heard me mention this, I'm sure. But this kind of, someone I had on recently described it as modes of work. And I think we're still stuck in this kind of industrial revolution mindset in a lot of companies, a lot of countries even, that time at the insert whatever it is, whether it's desk, machine, I don't know, shop, till, whatever. But time spent there equates to productivity, equates to output, money, results, whatever. It's just not true anymore. It hasn't been for like nearly 100 years, I feel like.
Yeah.
So why are we still thinking in those terms? Anyway, you shouldn't be having lunch at the machine. You should be, go and eat by the lake or go for a walk or sit in your car even would be better than sitting at your desk.
Yeah.
It's that mental break, isn't it, from this is not work time, therefore I shouldn't be sat at work.
Yeah, I was reading early this morning about a great friend of mine who he's a very well-known psychologist. He's had some amazing books that he's written, and I'm Tony, I'm really lucky to have him in my circle. And he has decided that he doesn't work Mondays anymore, and he now does a 4-day week because he wanted to try it because he'd heard so much about it. And there's been some real positive stories out, a bit mixed, but some real positive stories out there about a 4-day week. And you're right. I think it was Henry Ford that really pushed on this 5-day 9-to-5 work mentality that we have all fallen into. And evolution has changed. We no longer have children in factories. We know that no longer happens. It's absolutely the evolution of work has really changed. I feel like we've gone through a kind of quite a big revolution of work over the last few years, particularly triggered by COVID. I think it was there before 2020 where companies were trying to adopt. We saw like Virgin, who went out to the world and said, you'll have unlimited amount of holidays. Don't see that as much anymore. I know it backfired on a couple of companies, but it was that kind of relationship of going, you can have as many holidays as you want. And that was, that culture was trying to push through. And then in 2020, it absolutely proved that we can work remotely. We can work flexibly. And people started to measure what employees were doing on the back of what they were achieving and their output, opposed to the presenteeism and absenteeism that they were focused on. And it's a difficult. I've just been writing about that as well, that kind of that presenteeism culture. My personal opinion, lots of companies have really forced employees to go back to their business. It's because they've just not got it right. So they've had to resort to getting the employees back in the business. But do you know what? There are so many companies that have done it incredibly well and are being very successful. And those are the companies that will continue to thrive. The companies that have given up, that have admitted defeat, that have dragged their employees back in, kicking and screaming, what I add, those are the companies that will lose employees. That's my prediction, my personal prediction. Those are the businesses that will lose employees and will see employees burn out because they'll go elsewhere and they'll go and work for those companies that are a lot more flexible. And Yeah, I just don't see it working. I really don't, because they've just admitted defeat. Actually, the ones that are, I wish that they just worked on it better. I wish that they'd just done better, because the culture of those businesses have failed them, sadly. Quite a bold thing to say. I appreciate that.
No, I'm with you. I think, I'm struck by every time I see one of those articles or somebody complaining about one of those companies, which is the majority of it is somebody complaining about it, isn't it? Which should be its own warning sign, I would have thought. But it's the lack of consideration for context and the lack of consultation in it. That's usually the sticking point, I think. Because I think most people, especially if they've been in the job for a while since before COVID, they will understand, okay, well, it worked fine before. Okay, for me, this would work better. But I think if you have that process where it's a conversation and you can both like exchange your views and understandings of it, then maybe meet in the middle, and hybrid is probably the solution for most businesses if everyone involved is being honest about it. But I think this kind of just this knee-jerk default to, right, well, I'm the boss, come back to the office or lose your job. I mean, you're basically just saying, I don't care about these current set of employees. That's the message you're sending, intentionally or not, because they've been working remotely for COVID years for longer. They've kept your business running, by the way. They didn't have to do that, but they did in all of those uncertain times. And it's just so disrespectful. I don't get it. Like, just have a conversation. Who's that going to hurt? Worst case, you've still got that fallback later, but at least start by talking to people about it first.
I'll be honest. Again, like this, that goes back to that 360. I guess it goes back to the authenticity and the vulnerability. But just go, look, this isn't working for us because we're finding that too many employees take advantage, or we haven't quite understood how to manage as well as we can do, and openly engage with those conversations. I appreciate and I acknowledge that, and I know people in this world, that it's difficult to onboard new employees when they are remote, but there are plenty of employees that also want to work in an office. So we can get that balance back, then great. I think it's, there's still there's a lot to be done to figure out how to effectively work with remote and hybrid environments and how to get that right. But just being that little bit more vulnerable and just saying, look, we're trying to work our way through it. It isn't necessarily the right way of doing it. So actually we need you to come in for this. And I know you work remotely, but we're running this and we really need you to be here. That's fine. If employees are sitting there and saying, how dare you know I'm not coming in, I work remotely, I won't come there, tough, then that's not really the right culture to have in your environment. But if you actually are saying to, look, we're still working on it, it's going to take us another decade, generations take a long time for a culture to change. So we're still trying to get it right as a business, but we're doing this. We can't quite figure it out, but could you come in because we need to do X, Y, and Z? When graduates find it particularly hard. I've seen lots of businesses, being in the world of HR for a long time where I was, finding graduates that are coming into a business and trying to onboard them and trying to find their way into the business. It's really tough. My godson was one of them back in the early days. He was really struggling to find the right way to get into a business. And being there face to face, seeing the whites of people's eyes, then absolutely we get to, we really get to understand and develop an understanding of a culture better. But don't give up. Don't give up and just say, that's it now, we've given up, everyone's back. Just say we're still trying to work our way through it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the fact that there's quite a few companies out there, quite a lot probably, who are managing to do this really well. Even the challenging aspects of it, like onboarding. And again, like for new entrants to the workplace who've never worked in a physical location anyway, they don't have any expectations around that. That shouldn't be more difficult if the company's getting it right. And maybe it's, I don't know. It'd be very easy to make that kind of sweeping statement, wouldn't it? Like it's just grumpy old managers who just don't want to change their ways. And that's equally unfair. But I do feel like there's not enough compromise, meeting in the middle. There's not enough conversations in these organisations where it is going wrong.
Yeah. There's plenty of people that are trying, but they just can't get it right and they don't know why. And, I feel like we've got a duty as a business community to be able to help them as well. As a society, we need to help them. But I do feel like and it's a sweeping generalization because I know some people are desperately wanting to try, but those businesses that have clearly just given up and just gone, I'll just come back into the office, or they are unwilling, probably is the right phrase. They're unwilling to explore it and try and overcome it. They've just gone, do you know what? Everyone get back in the office, tough. Those people really do need to change. But yeah, there's plenty of people that are giving up because they just can't figure it out. But yeah, the ones that genuinely don't want to change are the ones that annoy me.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? So I mean, on that note, sorry, I'm conscious of time as well. Yes. But on that note, one thing that I have to laugh at, because it's the only way to deal with it. Like, I'm not disputing there will be some organisations out there where physical in-person is the only way their organisation works, for whatever the reason might be. Let's not get into the why. But I do feel as well, though, if you're going to say that to your employees, you've got to have the evidence to back it up.
Yes. And
so on that evidence, like the classic one that you see in these articles all the time is, it's about the culture. It's just not the same. And I have to laugh at that massive irony there, because by saying it's the culture and then forcing everyone back into the office who mostly don't want to be there, what exactly do you think you're going to be doing to your culture?
Yeah.
Like, how is that solving? You're forcing people to be somewhere they don't want to be, and you think that's going to be better for right?
Well, that is their culture, is it not? Like, who are we to say what the right and wrong cultures are in businesses? But certainly that's their culture.
I don't know. But it feels like a no-brainer that everyone in the room not wanting to be there is probably not the right culture any business wants, isn't it? Like,
culture, nevertheless. But it works for some people, but probably very few people. Absolutely.
If you're comfortable with high turnover and
a culture that's tough, coming or not, is not a great culture to have, but it's one nevertheless.
Yeah, it's a choice.
Some people choose to do that. I'm sorry, I'm aware of time as well. Is a friend of mine, and I don't want to. I'll keep it as anonymous as I can do. But a friend of mine is one of the top billers within the company, does incredibly well, and they are still holding them accountable to the amount of sales calls that they do, the amount of meetings that they have, but they are doing phenomenally well in terms of financials. And I can't believe these cultures still exist. I used to work in a business, in a recruitment business that was very much like that. I was the top billing margin consultant in the country, or one of the top billing margin consultants in the country. And I'd still go onto sales calls and they'd say, but how many of these have you got? And if you've absolutely far exceeded your financial target month on month for a year, they would still tell you off if you've not made enough sales calls and not had enough sales meetings. And we go back to that phrase of working smarter, not harder. And I talk about myself as a lazy consultant because I did very well, and I didn't really have to try very hard to do that. But there was no way that I liked that culture of being told that I had to do X amount of calls. And unfortunately, that still does exist. And how I see it is that there are lots of regional directors, for example, where they are looking at those figures and they are saying, I've got to report into the board, and the board are looking at how many sales calls we've done and how many sales we've done, and they will hold me accountable. So I need, trying to use some anonymous names here. I've got John over here that's doing £100,000 and doing 10 sales calls. And I've got somebody, Jane over here that's doing 100,000 calls and doing £10 of sales. I need to balance those averages out somewhere. But they are absolutely driving the high performers mad because they've got to hit those sales call targets, and they'll drive them away from their business because they'll go, do you know what? I'll go elsewhere. People that value that I am bringing the sales in, and I'll go elsewhere. And that's just going to leave those companies in a lurch. And it still happens. It really does. And they're just focusing on the wrong metrics. And, the managers need to be more empowered to get rid of the people that are doing low sales calls and doing low sales numbers. And they really do need to just get on top of that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's back to what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? About defining success and measuring the right things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And why have 100 people in your business when 50 of them are just not, okay, we need to look at the potential of those people. And if they haven't got the potential, they need to leave. Sadly, reluctantly, but sadly it's a business. But if there are people, if you're doing that with 100 people and you could do it well with 60 or 50 people, then why are you doing it with 100 people? Why? You just need to get better at managing those, those low performers, developing them and, exiting them quickly and looking after those high performers as well as everybody else in the organization. It's just so wrong. And, forgive me for using this word, but so stupid. It really is. It really is.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah. Really. The definition of stupidity in my own mind. I'm speaking very candidly, I know, but yeah, it is very counterintuitive.
Yeah, definitely. Right, Gary, I've got one question left, and it's the only one that everyone has to answer, so you can't escape it, I'm afraid. It's leadership heroes.
Leadership heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it could be anyone you can think of, whether that be alive, dead, past, present, real, or fictitious, but it's got to be someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So who would that be for you, and why?
Do you know, I'm going to use a personal story of somebody that no one will know, if that's okay. But there's a guy called Rob that I worked with when I was back in the day of Dixon's in the UK. I think it was international back in the day. I really missed that brand. It was a great little shop. And I had a guy called Rob who was the manager of that branch. And he absolutely encouraged everything that I did. He was a very compassionate leader. He was somebody that made sure that I was going off to other branches and learning and seeing what was going out there. He protected like my personal boundaries. So, I remember one day he came up to me and questioned something with me and said, "Oh, I noticed that we had a bit of a joke about this. Are you okay? Like, do you want to have a conversation?" And I said, "Oh no, it's banter, but great. Thank you for coming and finding me and having that conversation." And he was a great guy that absolutely encouraged me to do what I needed to do to be able to be successful in my role, and also had my back. He absolutely did. And that was right through to, and I appreciate this is the last question that you're asking me, so I'll not get too drawn into it, but that was right through to when I was unwell, when I was 18, when I woke up one day with half my face paralyzed, and I had Bell's palsy, so a common form of facial paralysis. And whilst I took a lot of time out of work, he absolutely, and I get it. I understand that, the companies want to bring you back into the world of work and they want to do a return to work and all of that technical stuff. But Rob, for me, absolutely said, "What do you want to do?" And I got involved in the warehouse. I was putting stock out on the shop floor instead of sales. And he absolutely led with compassion, with adaptability, and saw the potential and the best within me. And he was great, really, really great leader. And I continued to lead with wherever Rob is in the world now. His surname escapes me, but I'll try and find it. Wherever Rob is now, hopefully he looks back and sees how I'm going forward, how I'm, interacting with the world, that actually there's a little bit of Rob in what I do. And I think that's, really, really important.
And I mean, that last bit, I'm carrying a bit of that leader with me everywhere I go, even today, after however many years. I won't
Too
ask.
many years.
I'll be polite. I won't ask.
30 odd years,
I didn't ask.
Funny. I'm trying to work out now. Full disclosure, 42 when I was 18. So I'm rubbish with maths, mental arithmetic.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the week we're recording this, it's actually International Leadership Week. And the theme this year is leadership legacy. And I think that story, I mean, what better legacy is there for a leader than decades later, we've still had that impact on the way other people choose to lead as a result of what we've done. Great story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's I can mention so many celebrities out there, but absolutely it's the people that we know, the people that, and I do think as we go through our career, we mature and we find our own way. And, I'm soon to turn 42 at the end of April. And absolutely, I'll continue to take so much from, certainly over the last year, of what I've been doing and the people that I've been mentoring. I'm taking a whole different perspective of the world with me. And whether it's, managers that I've had, leaders that I've had in my life, if I can just take a little bit from everyone and pass that, good and bad, to pass that back on to the people that I now mentor is really, really important. And get that message out there that, there isn't a stigma as much as we think there is in the world of mental health and well-being for leaders. We can be ourselves and be vulnerable and be open, and there's a lot of compassion within the business community as well. And I think we can be our own heroes, if I can use that phrase. But made up of many different parts of many different people.
I like it. Well, Gary, time has flown. We've touching on hour and 45 now. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time and all of your stories and everything. If anyone in the audience would like to learn more about you, your work, perhaps get involved in your Selfish Leader program, is there a link or a website where they can go to find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been lucky enough to be able to find lots of social media handles. So if you look for Gary Parsons UK, so Gary with one R, Parsons with an S on the end. So Gary Parsons UK. So on all the social media platforms, you can find me on there. To make it easier, I've got a website which is garyparsons.uk to make it easy to find me. And we've not mentioned it, but I've also got a podcast called Leaders in Disguise. So it's all talking about leaders that wear disguises, that try to navigate through life, where they hopefully come on a podcast and most often they unmask and they talk about challenges that they've never spoken about before, ranging from domestic violence through one leader, a leader where he's experienced domestic violence, right through to challenges of people considering taking their lives, and lots of successful businesses along the way. So if you look online for Leaders in Disguise, after you've listened to this episode, of course, and reviewed us and commented on this episode, then come and jump over to Leaders in Disguise, and I look forward to seeing you there over on that channel as well.
Lovely. Well, Gary, I'll let you go. I know you have a busy afternoon ahead of you, so I don't want to detain you any longer, but
thank you again
so much, and keep up the great and important conversations that you're having.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity of being able to talk about it as well. More conversations like this, absolutely, and I'm sure I have more guests on there as well. So thank you.
Yeah, well, come back anytime.
I'll hold you to it.
Gary, huge thanks again for your time today and for giving so much of it. Listener, viewers, there is a selection of links for Gary's websites and social medias in the show notes, as well as a link to his podcast as well. So do go and give that a listen too. And if you are that new leader, if you are stuck, if you're struggling, if you're facing that sink or swim moment in your leadership and you're looking for help, for clarity, for a safe, non-judgy kind of space to talk about some of the challenges that you may be facing in your leadership journey, do come along and join us at Integrity Leaders, the online community for new and first-time leaders, founders, new managers, etc. Again, you'll find the link in the show notes. Do come and join us. And that's all I've got time for really today. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll be back again next week when we're kicking off a new month with a new guest, Al McBride, and we'll be talking about the role of negotiation and communication in leadership. Hope to see you then. And until then, stay safe. Start having some of those mental health conversations that we've talked about today. And of course, as always, be a leader, not a boss.